Welcome everybody to another episode of the Forge Forward podcast. I'm Phil de Cruz and we're here with our fearless leader, Courtney Smith. Say hi to your fans out there, mate.
G'day.
That's good. Today we've got something special. We've got Daryl Vine from the Firefly initiative. He's to drop some knowledge bombs and give us the peak what's driving the future in the volunteering space and the community. So buckle up. It's going to be a good one, mate. Cordo, lead us off, mate.
Hey, Viney. Good to have you on board, mate. And there's a good reason for that. We've got a little bit of history. We have identified as a couple of mates over 20 years that we've got a few things in common. And the good thing now is we've got the Firefly in common. I joined the journey a few years ago with a great mate of mine, Daryl, who's in front of us today, for one solitary reason. We're both community dudes. We both saw that there was a major impact taking place around volunteerism in our community sectors. And as a result, we're not guys that like to do things in small. We try and get into the hardest possible change making that's available at any one point in time. And so we've got together and launched the Firefly initiative. 5% of ticket sales are going to the Firefly Fund to support communities, which is awesome. So all our partners, thanks. You've got to bring your people along, because what you don't know out there in Partnerland is that you've got a whole swathe of customers that are the superstars, the DJs of community that are volunteers. And I promise you don't speak to them about those sort of personal things that are probably one of the most personal conversations you can have outside of with a conversation around family. What do they do and why do they do good? So Daryl, pleasure having you in the room. It's a big one today because it's personally connected to me and the outcomes we're trying to make.
Yeah, hey, Smithy, always a pleasure. And Phil, thanks for the invitation to share with the Forge community some of the background of Firefly, our BHAGs, our goals, our motivations, and our mission statement, which is to elevate volunteers. One of the things that we know, economy's tight, economy's hard, the business sector, and part of that, innovation play that we're really excited about. And I'm personally excited about Forge Conference as well. Being the old guy in the room, I'm fairly well led in innovation by someone who will be nameless at the moment, but might be Courtney Smith. So that thing, one of those things about that, our motivation and inspiration to elevate volunteers, because it's a sector that is the biggest in the world. It's the biggest industry sector. So yeah, we're pretty excited. So thanks for having me along. It's really good to be maybe talking in a different format today.
I'm going to set a tone here, Phil, before we get into the Q&A, and the tone is we've got a half an hour max, just so we're all aware.
Yeah, no talkers in this room, right? No talkers.
Yeah, no one can speak in this room, right? Mm-hmm. So let's get into it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, perfect. Yeah, and the volunteer, it needs some love, and I'm ready for you to spread the message of that. So let's start off by saying, tell us about your journey and what experiences have led you to sharing your insights at the Forge conference.
Yeah, right. Well, it started a long time ago. One of the things Courtney talked about, we've got a few things in common that go along with that journey. One of them is our parents. Avid community people. We both grew up small country towns. Both our families were committed to community service in different various ways. So that journey started a long time ago, and moving through all the different parts of business world. And, it's really amazing when you sit back and think about how many lives are affected by somebody doing good for somebody else. And in most cases, it's somebody they don't know, or, it's a sporting passion that leads to a club being established. It's a church group that needs to do things to help feed third world countries. It's charities that need funds raised for medical research. Like, it's just ridiculous, Phil, about how wide and how many people are touched. So our journey started with that background. My personal journey, going through a whole heap of things. I like I said, brought up in a small country town. I was a bit of a self-starter. I started my own business when I was 19 and got recruited into a number of other things. I paid for my way through college thanks to music. We had a band that played 3 nights a week, so we were rich kids on campus, which was awesome. But coming out of that and then getting into sales and marketing and looking through that process, and then I spent 14 years in sponsorship and really started to see how bad sponsorship is. Like it's just not a good environment, you know. We have this, like there's this undertone as well that we're sort of scared to talk about money, especially in the volunteer sector. Everyone needs it. No one really wants to discuss it. It's sort of that thing that happens. And so we hide donations under the umbrella of sponsorship. So it's one of those things that, and now that we move through into, you know, into tech and innovation and things that we used to have to do by mail, you know, the old Australia Post snail mail, everything took a lot longer back then, but there was time to consider different aspects. So working through that journey and then coming together with Smithy, like you said, you know, 20 years ago with some other, you know, sort of tech application. I think at the end of the day, Phil, you sum up that I've always been on the side of the underdog. You know, I have no interest really in badminton, but if I turn the TV on and there's a badminton going on and one guy's getting flogged for 17-4, I'll be barracking for the guy that's on 4. Do you know what I mean? So, and not that I think that, not that I think that volunteers are the underdog, but when you think about it, you know, there's a lot of it that is overlooked. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of stuff that just don't get seen, primarily because we don't want to see them. Because if you look too hard, then you might get asked to do it as well. So there's still a great deal of the community do that. So, you know, just been really fortunate to have come through lots of different life experiences, being involved in clubs, being involved in committees, volunteering just about all my life. And then the joy to have a business partner that rings one day and he goes, "Hey, what do you think of the VEC?" And I go, "What?" And he says, "The volunteer energy credit." And I went, "That's gold. That's gold. That's a way to measure what impact has been done by this community." So yeah, a bit of background. I mean, I've had my finger in a few pies throughout that time and had lots of successes, and like every other entrepreneur, had some not so successful experiences, but you learn from them. And here we are, and here we are with a great program, and we're really starting to see the traction behind it now. And I mean, I had a conversation this morning with another volunteer organisation that just went like, "Wow, it's just amazing. Thanks for thinking about it." So
that's perfect. That's the kind of conversation we want to hear, and then the kind of aha moments we want to create it for. It's those, you know what?
Yeah.
Volunteer credit, perfect. It just fits in right well. Well, it almost leads into my next question, which was saying technology is advancing at a rapid rate, particularly around AI. And people tend to fall into 3 different categories. It's either the visionary, the cautious explorer, or the resistor. Which one are you, Daryl?
Cool. Yeah, there's a good question, right? So I would have said, if you'd asked me this question probably 2 years ago, it would definitely be number 3.
The resistor, righto.
Yeah, and only be like, and it's one of those things, and I really understand why there is the resistors. You know, there's that old expression, "Phil, you can't teach an old dog new tricks." You know, and so there's lots of us that have been really successful, and I'm sure that there'll be so many of the partners at 10 Forged as well that have been successful in what they do. But you know, like, and Smithy brought up, there is some successful companies like Remington Typewriters. They were really successful with what they did. Do you know what I mean? But that basis, so I would have been a resistor, knowing, you know, I can get on the phone and ring anybody. I can generate revenue that way. Now, having the wealth of knowledge that's been passed on by my buddy, who, you know, I mean, sometimes a bit extreme because I can't keep up with it. It's like, no sooner has he announced a new thing that there's another new thing to replace that new thing. So as a resistor, that makes it pretty hard. But
yeah, we need to get the hands off his time machine somehow, Daryl.
Yeah, I know, right?
He uses it quite frequently.
But
I think
you know that
Spielberg created a movie called Back to the Future that he partook in. Yeah.
But the one thing that I've learned about Courtney over the 20 years is that he never just has a flamboyant idea. in relation to innovation and technology. You know, he smashes it, he breaks it. If it breaks, we don't use it. If it has significant upside, and then through that process of encouragement and logic, you know, which I think a lot of people don't apply to technology either. They don't see the logic behind it. They see an emotional or a reactory response. Oh, that's too hard, or I don't know whether. But when you've got a teacher like Smithy that goes, this is the practical application, this is the benefit it's going to cause. It's not going to take away from this, but it's going to add to that. Then the resistor can actually start to become someone that says, yeah, I get it. And then there's some stuff that I do, and I'll take credit for this, where being a graphic designer, I look at some of that thing and I go, when I bring the artistic skills to that technology, it's a different world altogether. So
You get to express.
yeah, I'm probably somewhere between a 1 and a 2 now, I think, Phil.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, I'll take that. That'll be great.
And I've been sitting here quietly smiling and listening to this conversation unfold against two new friends while this guy in the corner listens to an interesting conversation. Look, the takeaway for me is it gets a little bit to the why, right? So we've got this Forge conference. There's two elements to Forge. There's the bit that we just talked about, that conversational piece around where are you in the future curve?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself in this revolutionary change that's coming at us at exponential speed? And a lot of people will resist, and they've got good right. They've got good right, because at the base we're humans. And so when I get to experience events like Burning Mind the other day, where we got together as a group of people, had human interactions, collaborations, I know why people would want to resist the technology, robots of the future piece. Yep, I get it. The amazing thing about Firefly, and probably my strongest single sentiment to why I want to see it successful, is that it's a human connection piece. It's the bit that we can't afford to lose in society. It's the bit that if it's in a dystopia where we lose volunteers because we get sucked into the digital world and we miss that physical interaction. Now, I might be old in my thinking on that, and trust me, for everyone out there, I don't think old. I'm a 10-year-old heart. But that bit there is the bit that I can recall as being the most important connections I've made in my life around community, and the most important outcomes I've had in my life around helping communities. So, I don't want to lose that piece as to why Firefly is something that's important to me, but also for this event, is that everyone out there, I think, that's going to attend, our partners and the networks, are going to have people that are living volunteer world and love it for the things it gives back to them. So, yeah, look, if we had one thing to rip out of an attendee with respect to learning something from Firefly or gaining some insight, what would that be, Daryl? I've got a bit passionate there because we all know how I get. I do get passionate about it. Yeah.
Oh, look, I think, and just if I can foot back to that that question too about the integration of AI in that model, because we've had lots of conversations in relation to the volunteer audience. We've got 16-year-old volunteers through to 85-year-old volunteers. So there is a real a broad spectrum of understanding, of acceptance, and all that sort of stuff. So, but when you bring that across to, if our tool and if AI and if other technology can help you with that personal thing, because I struggle to think how AI can say thank you to somebody. Can it give me some ways to say thank you? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's still that we have to say thank you. We have to appreciate, how does AI show gratitude?
Humans are struggling with it.
I know, right? So if we are learning backwards, in other words, that we've taught computers how to teach us how to do that, then great. That's a fantastic use of the innovation. If we can get back to what we should do anyway as humans, right? But it's one of the things, and Phil, in this sector, it's the thing that gets you up every morning, is the fact that I get to talk to people that are doing amazing things, and a lot of times they're doing things that aren't acknowledged. They just do it, and we get to say thank you, number one. So now that I've diversified, Smithy, I can't remember what your question was because I get passionate about it.
What insight? You pretty much covered it anyway. The insight is the human piece and the importance of it.
It is
in everything we do.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to define that out into what is community, who are struggling, who need tools, who need support, who need different ways of thinking. You know, typically you start a cause or passion because something's happened, a heavy visceral effect in your life, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're sitting there with this weight on your shoulders because you've made that commitment to try and keep that thing alive and show that you don't want to let go of that passion. You don't have the skills, the bandwidth, and so there's all sorts of technology aspects to simplifying that process for people that I can see and we've talked to in our business and want to pass on to those communities as well. So on that note, just pushing that a little bit further, is there one signal that you have that seems to stand out to you at the moment that's important that you're seeing, whether it's technological, whether it's in community, just a signal you're seeing that you think you want to bring to bear for conversation today?
One signal, yeah. Look, we've had lots of conversations, and it's probably the misinterpretation or the misunderstanding of intrinsic value. We hear a lot about, volunteers are great people because of the intrinsic value. Yeah. If we thought about that from a business perspective, like I'm only in business so I gain, we would never have any business stream. You know what I mean? And irrespective of how you're embracing technology and innovation to do that, the pure business fundamentals is I need clients or customers to sustain my business. So therefore I have to give them value. But the volunteer sector seems to be in this confused state about the fact that volunteers only do things for their own internal benefit, which is just so far from the truth. It's not funny, and the more conversations we have about that, the more volunteers are starting to understand that it's the smile on somebody's face. It's the funding that's gone into cancer research that potentially saves somebody's life. That is the real motivation for them to be able to do what they do. So the signal that we get, Smithy, is I think more and more volunteers are starting to understand that I've got rid of the birds and got bugs in my office now. It's more, and if we can highlight really effectively Firefly, the true value of the contribution, then, because people see the time that they spend as a contribution, but don't really understand that it actually has this magnificent ripple effect across hundreds and hundreds of people potentially. So I think that's the trigger it's one that I'm working on personally is to make sure that each of the volunteers aren't only just acknowledged for the time that they give, but they really understand the value that they actually bring in that. So, but those three things, it's sort of like the trilogy, the intrinsic value, which if it doesn't make you feel good, you're not going to do it. But really appreciate the extrinsic value that you've created and the value of that contribution.
Yeah, you completely answered my next question, Daryl, which was what are the challenges and how do you overcome them? So that's perfect, mate. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
But lucky I've got a backup question for you. What lessons from your career you're thinking about the future of various industries from your career guide?
Well, there's lots of them, right? The insurance industry, number one, it's really interesting that, in Australia, from a statistical point of view, more people have pet insurance than life insurance. So that's a real quandary. So if you're in that sector, then there's some work to be done there. The property market, we are one of the most expensive places in the world to buy property. I think we need some more reliable outcomes in the entrepreneurial space to create a diversified mix of investment opportunity for people, because we have now seemed to be leaning just on property as an investment vehicle. And I grew up in the days when your house was your home. It wasn't a way to make money. Now we diversify, and we've got people that are, and because the housing market's not getting any better, right? The prices are going up. We've still got people that can't afford rent. We can't afford this, and that's because it's now an investment vehicle, not a house. So that market is, there needs to be some significant change in that
There's only
space as
one
well.
thing there's one thing that I've seen a slight change was they're trying to abolish the stamp duty. I think it was from 10% went down to 9% last financial year, and they're trying to knock off a percentage each
Yeah.
year. But that's
Yeah,
a tough one too. Like, look, if they're not
Rob,
getting the
Peter, say
stamp
Paul,
duty, where are they
man.
getting it
Rob,
I was
from?
going to
Rob,
say, I don't want to get into a political conversation, but I don't trust any government that says we're going to get rid of this tax just so I can put this tax over here.
Exactly right.
You know,
Exactly right.
it's just, it's mandrake. It's smokes and mirrors, man. They all are trying to say, oh, on this particular sector. Well, and when you think about how many people that will actually assist versus the consequence of that to the rest of the community. So anyway, like I said, do you want to get into a political or
That's all right. That's
or
all right. We're
government
getting
conversation?
I'm just gonna add a little bit because I think there's some flavour to be added. So they're terrific insights on industries, and I know your background, so I know why you lean into those. The bit I'm interested about is about this community conundrum, right? And I'll give you two conundrums. Number one is the amount of not-for-profits that are set up in the same space, doing the same things, without the support and structures. So they're doing it tough, right? And then the other one is potentially the concept around that this digital generation and what's happening with the future of our next generation of volunteers, where their appeal lies, and potentially the gaps between, I'll call, the committed volunteer and the experiential volunteer. Could you just talk a little bit about that, because we've got a bit to cover, so try and keep it as sharp as you can, bud.
Yeah. Look, and it's one of the things that we're trying to work really hard on. The sector itself, 270,000 not-for-profit organisations, 67,000 charities, and 80,000 local sporting clubs. I mean, that's massive amount of not-for-profits in the Australian population and in the economy. And touching on that point, Smithy, it's like if I go to a strip shop down, Caulfield, for example, and we had pizza there one night. It was really good. Side issue. But I'm not going to see 5 fish and chip shops in a row. And if I do, one will dominate and the rest will be rubbish. But in this space, and look, and God love them all, because every and charity and not-for-profit is built out of like you said earlier, Court, a passionate outcome. Something has happened that has moved me to say I want to make a difference. So it's great, but there is really, really bad collaboration. We look at it in the business sector. If I'm going to make a bridge and I'm going to build a bridge over the Yarra, I need all the partners. I need the concreter, I need the engineer, I need the labour force, I need all of that. But that doesn't seem to translate to the not-for-profit sector. They're all in these little silos. And you'll get one.
What's that phrase you use about you're in the business of what? Finish that phrase for me, the charity phrase you use, which is
yeah. So I have this mandate to all charities. I said, you don't run a charity, you run a business whose product is a charity, right? So there is this charitable outcome that everything that comes in, and that's why most charities can't pay their CEO, because they think for some reason that has to be a donated cause as well. But there is not a great deal of that nuance as far as we are running a business whose product is charity, or we're running a business whose product is local sport, or we're running a business whose product is religion. It doesn't matter what that sector says, which is why Firefly was set up as a for-profit for a purpose, not a not-for-profit organisation.
Yeah.
Because we run a business whose product is elevating volunteers and elevating the volunteering community, and linking with that the participating partners that want to show support, the local businesses, the national brands, the large corporates who have in their infrastructure a percentage of volunteers. So it's sort of like almost ironic, if they don't support their own staff, then how will the staff support their business? Do you know what I mean? So we have this really great, and as Smithy says, it's the 360-degree economy. It's a quadratic philanthropy play that we think is awesome. The more the volunteer gives, the more the community benefits, the more the community benefits, the more the business benefits, the more the business can give. So it's this evolutionary process, and we're starting to get the steamball rolling, and it's starting to, one of those things, roll downhill, pick up momentum. So yeah, and the beauty about it is no one is excluded in our marketplace. No volunteer is excluded, no organisation is excluded, no local business is excluded, no national brand. So when we talk about total inclusion, we include technology as a platform, innovation as a platform, intrinsic, extrinsic value as a platform, giving and caring and doing good as a platform. We are the total inclusive package at the Firefly Initiative.
It's funny, and I know you've got a question to come, Phil, but I'm going to look at your T-shirt there, mate, and I noticed a logo, and it's ESG, and we've got some conversation coming in around ESG. We're not there to play that card hard because it's got some political connotations around it now. There's two different camps that are talking. What I do know is that as a society we need to be sustainable, and that'll come through in conversation. And we need to show how we use our energy, because it's a massive, massive component of the future of AI. It's going to absorb more energy than countries in some data sets, right? So these are the big topics we're going to talk at Forge, which are relating to who we are as humans and how we operate in business. What's interesting though is in ESG, the social component's often forgotten, and perhaps you can just quickly segue and I know you will because of the question I've asked, but into why we saw that as a gap, and perhaps why organisations can think a little bit differently around the way in which they support community.
Yeah, interesting, because we and we've been around and we've had multiple branches off into different areas of that in power, sustainability, solar sustainability, energy solutions sustainability as well. And it's really easy to get a measure on that. As I said earlier, Phil, that years ago Smithy came up with this VEC, the Volunteer Energy Credit, and it was loosely defined in relative to the VEC, the REC, right, the Renewable Energy Credit that the government implemented to offset carbon emission. And it was really easy to measure, because it's just how much carbon are you putting into the air, and it's $20 a tonne, and that's your bill. On the social side, you go, if all our technology development, our innovation is about alternative energy supplies and sustainability, and we save the planet, but we have no mankind, there is no humanity left, then what was the point of saving the planet in the first place? So we saw this major gap about, and look, and it comes from being parents as well. My kids are 30 down to 30, 32 this year, down to 22. These are in the 20 down to the 16 bracket. And we've seen a change over 20 years of what has happened to their attitude. And I'm not having a go at the youth, but I'm having a go at the youth. And I'm having a go at us as well, is that there is some cultural things like respect, like integrity, like drive, like desire, like grit, like all of those things that have been pacified to the point nearly of non-existence, so there is this real societal issue. And if we don't start to look at how do we improve society as a whole, then what's the point of saving the planet? If we don't look at society as a whole, is what's the point of giving money to UNICEF to go to third world countries when it's a terrific band-aid, don't get me wrong, but it's a band-aid. We're not changing anything, we're sustaining it. So we saw that as a real significant hole, especially when this brand came out of environmental and social governance, and we thought, here we go, this will be good. What is the downside to not being socially compliant? What is the downside? Like we did a quick survey. Telstra has 26,000 staff, and not to mention any names, but they have, at the moment, around about 3,000 of them are on work cover.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them, and I go, do you know why? Well, they've got a doctor's certificate that they're stressed. Do you know what's causing the stress? So even from that major corporate down to the detachment, we've lost that. That's because that's a community and a society in itself. Telstra, all the major corporates are. So there's this real hole in the one, how do we measure what is social, what's the social impact, what's the relevance to that, what's the socio-economic impact to that, how do we measure it, number one, and then how do we do something about making sure that we're improving it without limitation and without any prejudice and without any isolation.
And hyperlocal, right? Because that's
hyperlocal, yeah.
In our
I mean, everything comes down to it.
Yeah.
All the good speakers and talking about tech platforms and all that sort of stuff. I'm a bit of a Jordan Peterson fan, and all of the major advocates talk about fix your backyard first. So everything comes down to community. I have a community called my family, and then we have the community called my neighbours, and then we have a community called our suburb, and then we have a community called our town. So everything comes back to how we socially engage with everybody in our community, however big or small that community is. So we're really passionate about making sure that the major contributors to societal change, the volunteers, have the opportunity to
remain and sustain.
That opportunity.
We're just crossing the 30-minute mark. As I said, we would do it easily.
Right.
Let's wheel this one home, Phil. What do we want to close out on, mate?
Let's close out on one nice one. What is your vision for the future? And you've mentioned some strategies, but is there any other ways you can influence that change across those different sectors that we speak about?
How long we got for this one? How long we got for this one? We've got 31 minutes for this one.
You've got sum it up in 2 sentences.
Wow.
Look, I think, and I'll try and summarize it, and as quickly as my belief system allows me to do that. We have a couple of mantras at Firefly. One, and part of our constitutional mantra is that our app and the delivery of that technology will be free to organisations and volunteers forever, because they're already doing enough and we shouldn't make them pay. We have another mantra that doing good is always good. And I think if there is some way that we can innovate, that we can educate, that we can inspire, that becomes a societal mantra, that I think about the good that I can do before I do anything. And if I think about the good that I can do, and whatever my activity is not going to produce good for myself or for somebody else, don't do it. And I think, and we can use technology for that, we can use innovation for that. It's one of those things that, and especially if we can create the appetite for the business community and for all those people that are enjoying the benefit of having customers, that if they can do good for every customer, then they get good. If the customer does good for a business, they get good. And I think, Phil, across the whole spectrum, and I know that's a little holistic, but I don't know how to actually sum up a broad spectrum question like that any better.
I can help you.
All right, go on.
It's one word, and we nearly created a brand off it: reciprocity.
Yeah. Reciprocity, we call it at Firefly.
Recipro.city, we were going to call it.
Yeah, come on down to Reciprocity.
Yeah, I think we even made a song about it, right? So
yeah.
I think that's a wonderful closeout. If you're coming from a space that is all about reciprocal thinking, then you're probably going to have a life that's full, abundant, and successful. And on that note, I think, I'd like to say thank you very much. We could go forever. Mr. Darryl Vine, colleague, founder, partner, friend. Thanks for joining Forge, and thanks for putting a light on Firefly today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Phil. Thanks,
Darryl. Cheers, buddy.
Phil,
Good luck.
Cheers.
Thank you.